Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You made it. I made it.
I made it.
And most importantly, Liz Murdoch made it. And as they say in The Sun, here we are. And actually, here it is. Never mind, we'll come to that.
There it is. There you go.
Well, look, that was a remarkable speech. Everyone's talking about it, which is the point, I guess.
Good.
The press have covered it very widely. Lots of comment here and there. And I think it's fair to say that I can't remember anybody else getting a standing ovation.
Oh.
So, congratulations for
I
that.
packed the audience with a lot of Shine people.
What was I say? I noticed that it was Matthew Freud was, I think, first up, but otherwise.
Well, you know.
Yeah. Why did you make the speech?
As I said in the speech, you know, it's a huge honor to be asked to do it, and I felt that, you know, it was probably the right time. And it was fun in the end, despite my my pre-nerves. So, you know, I think there's a lot going on in the industry, and so it was, I thought, a good time to do it.
But it won't have escaped your notice that, of course, you are a Murdoch. It's either a blessing or a curse, but it's there, like it or not. You can't take the significance out of you choosing to do that. I know you were asked, and you could just say, "Well, I was asked, so I said yes." But what were your thoughts about doing it in terms of the bigger picture?
That's why it was so hard to write. You know, I think it's, you know, I wanted to contribute to our thoughts about the industry. It's obviously been a very big year. It's obviously been a very, as I said, you know, a bit of a nightmare year for the family. And I thought it was important to stand up and be counted and talk about it a little bit. So
are you sort of, do you see yourself as doing something for the family in that sense? Or is it for you?
No, well, who knows? We probably, hopefully, you know, contributed to some views, so that, you know, not everybody is tarred or marked with the same, you know, with the same brush. But no, I felt it was important to do. Funnily enough, I actually wanted to do it for Shine, because I'm so proud of the team that I have, and I wanted to be able to represent what we stand for. So I think I probably did it for them.
What do you make of the way that it's been reported, in terms of, you know, it's pretty straightforwardly being said that, you know, you've given one to James and you've done the opposite. You know, your father's your hero, but James really got it slightly wrong.
I hope that's. I saw The Guardian certainly led with that headline, which was not entirely unexpected, I suppose. But what I was trying to do was actually sort of say that there was something more. It wasn't the whole story. I wasn't sort of trying to directly contradict James in any way. I was trying to add, but this is what wasn't said. And I actually, in the speech, said that it was a very valid contribution to the debate. But I thought there was something that was left out that I thought was really important to talk about. I
mean, his timing was peculiarly poor, wasn't it? In the sense that he makes the MacTaggart, he makes the speech, and then within what feels like months, I know it was longer than that, but
I think it was longer
18 months, 2 years, the whole thing has kind of come undone.
Yeah, in retrospect, I don't think anyone would have necessarily predicted what was going to happen.
The other thing people imagine is that this might be, on your part, if you like, a pitch for the top job. What do you make of that?
I think if you listen to the speech, it was probably the opposite of that. You know, I really harbor absolutely no ambition for, you know, that top job that you refer to. You know. So, you know, if anything, you know, I think, and hopefully I was trying to make clear yesterday that, you know, Shine is at the beginning of an incredible journey. I mean, yes, we've been around for 12 years, but, you know, for me, we now have an incredible platform to keep growing, and so, you know, that's very much my home and where I belong.
Well, if it's any consolation to you, I sat next to a chap from China Central Television last night who told me that one of your shows had got 700 million viewers.
It was one of our Scandinavian shows, and they're in the audience today. Can you believe? I know.
700 million
think
viewers.
Think of those numbers and you go, wow.
I have to ask you about this. Is succession an issue in the family? I mean, it keeps coming up and it keeps being written about, and everyone keeps talking about it. And of course, people are interpreting your decision, at least, to speak in this way, to come out and be very public, as having some sort of being sort of part of that process. What's it like being in the Murdoch family?
You know, just going back to the first part of the question, you know, everyone sort of likes the idea of a soap opera, and it, you know, the reality is really not that. You know, we actually are a very close family. I love my brothers, I love my sisters. We're a normal family. We just have a bit of a spotlight on us at the moment. But no, it's not something that, you know, I think we're all our own people. You know, Lachlan's off running his own show. I've been running my own company. James is obviously in the business. My sister isn't. So it's more speculated upon than I think it merits.
Do you feel, again, this has been written fairly widely, do you feel that in succession terms or in sort of family terms that you've been overlooked?
No.
I mean, in favour of your brothers, for example.
But I don't think that way. I'm very much my own person. So I feel incredibly happy with what I do. I think I'm a natural entrepreneur, and I love building our company. So, you know, that doesn't cross my mind.
Is succession something that you have discussed?
No, not
I mean,
really.
you and Lachlan and James?
No, not really. Look, I think we all feel, you know, as children of the founder, we care passionately about the future of the company and very responsible for the future of the company in that founder way. But in terms of executive succession, no, you know, that's up to the board, and that's, you know.
See, I was reading there was a book about Sky called Sky High by Matthew Horsman when he interviewed your father,
I read
and he says,
it a long time ago.
and Rupert said to Matthew at the time, Elisabeth has some things to work out. She has to decide how many kids she's going to have and where she wants to live. Currently, it is their consensus, meaning the children, that Lachlan will take over. He will be first amongst equals, but they will all have to prove themselves first.
Yeah, that would show a generational difference, wouldn't it, between my dad and most people in terms of how many children one has. You know, I think it was like 10 or 12 years ago, that book. You know, and I think, you know, it certainly doesn't, it definitely fuels speculation, but you know, I think it's pretty out of date.
Again, it was also said in one piece I read, I think it was in the New York Magazine or Vanity Fair, I'm not sure, that in the wake of the phone hacking scandal, if you will, the breakout of the whole thing, which we'll talk about perhaps in a moment, that you'd had some form of group counselling almost to sort of discuss how to handle it. Is that right?
We've met as a family, you know, to talk about, you know, how the future as one, as a family does. And we haven't done it for a little while, actually. But yeah, but we did all get together and have a talk about it.
And prior to that, was it the consensus amongst you that James was, if you like, the heir apparent? I know these things are a long way off, and in the end the board has to decide and all of that, but was that a consensus amongst you, do you think?
Look, I think the consensus...
At one point?
You know, I think the consensus is that James is an incredibly able executive, and, you know, he is very much the one of us who is chosen to be within the company. And actually, it's actually very recent. If you think about Sky, he sort of was much more independent in a way. So it's never really been more than that.
Do you think that your dad said in the quote with Matthew, you know, they will have to prove themselves. Mm-hmm. Do you feel now that you have, it's not the end of the road, far from it, you're only just 40, and forgive me, to mention a lady's age, but nevertheless. But you know, so there's a long way to go, but do you feel as if you've proved yourself?
I hope so. Look, I'm somebody, and perhaps it came through in the speech, that always thinks that I could be better, we could do more. You know, I'm a very, restless isn't the right word. You know, I always think about what can be done. So, you know, I'm very comfortable now in my own skin in terms of, I'm incredibly proud of the team at Shine and what we stand for and what we do together. But, you know, I never feel completely satisfied. You always think of what more you can do.
You distance yourself from some of what James said in terms of his comments about profit and freedom and whatever. adding, as you point out, that your point about profit without purpose is, if you like, sort of the road to ruin. And I say that it's being interpreted as if there is you're more positive about this, you're more respectful of what your father said and slightly less respectful of what James had said. But I was looking at some of the things that your father said, in addition to the quote in his original, his MacTaggart, whenever it was, and it was quite trenchant stuff. I mean, he says, much of what passes for quality on British television really is no more than a reflection of the values of the narrow elite which controls it, and which has always thought that its tastes are synonymous with quality. A view, incidentally, with which a view, incidentally, that is natural to all governing classes. But this public service TV system has had, in my view, debilitating effects on British society by producing a TV output which is so often obsessed with class, dominated by anti-commercial attitudes, with a tendency to hark back to the past. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, he describes television as part of the cause of the English disease. Now, this is some time ago.
Oh, it was 1989.
Do you have any sympathy with that view at all?
No, I don't think it's a current view. And I don't think he would necessarily say that now. I don't know. That was 1989. It was just as Sky was launching. There was not much choice. It was a very, very different industry at the time. I think we've moved light years beyond those kind of views.
As a matter of interest, does he think that? Do you know?
I haven't asked him lately, but look, no. Well, funnily enough, I would dare to suggest no, he wouldn't, and you couldn't if you look at at broadcasting in this country today.
I mean, another quote from the speech, he said, "Public service broadcasters in this country have paid a price for their state-sponsored privileges. That price has been their freedom." Now, that chimes almost precisely with what James said about state-sponsored news and information and all of that. Do you have any sympathy for that argument?
What I was actually trying to say yesterday about the universality of the license fee, I think, is incredibly important. And I think it's also changed over the last 10 to 15 years. I do think there is a real sense of accountability to every single license fee payer. And as I said, I think that does give the BBC a very unique purpose. And I also said in this yesterday, that it of course, it is challenging to maintain your independence when you are reliant upon a universal public service license fee. I mean, it is challenging, but that doesn't mean that it has to, that it's not, you can't overcome it.
I mean, the argument from James and Rupert, if I understand it, is sort of almost broader than that. It sort of says that public subsidy has untoward consequences. It may be done for all the best of reasons, but it interferes with what you might call real market democracy, where people deciding to pay for things is a very straightforward kind of transaction.
Yeah.
The people dictate the choices. And you talked at the end of your speech.
And I trust people to make those choices. I mean, quite frankly, and I think the BBC is extremely conscious of this, and certainly has been since John Burt and Greg, that actually, yes, it's a mandatory levy, but the people have to. It is a democracy. I mean, there is no public outcry for paying 40 pence a day for the services of the BBC. So, for me, it's if it is something, if they fail to deliver on that purpose to the people, I think they'd know about it pretty fast.
Do you think British broadcasting would be better off if the BBC were smaller? Again, I remember James sitting in that seat, I think, doing whatever it was a couple of years ago, and actually getting out a board.
I heard that. I thought I should have come with stuff.
With all the services the BBC runs, it goes on and on and on, and put it all on board, it looks absolutely massive. And I mean, if one would take off the most extreme edge of what both your father and James said, which might be interpreted as kind of, well, just get rid of it, would Britain be better if it was smaller?
I think, well, would Britain be better? I'm not sure.
I think the bigger question is, and I sort of touched upon it really quickly because I couldn't say absolutely everything, that I do think that George is going to have to, in the next stage of where the BBC goes, really make sure that that license fee money is spent efficiently. And I think that's something that will be a debate in the next few years.
At the risk of sounding cynical, it was being, some people did venture the opinion last evening in the bazaars, as it were, that the reason that you strike a rather different pose in relation to the BBC to your brother and your father is that you generate tens of millions of pounds of revenue off the BBC by making programs for them.
I love the BBC. Well, I think that would be, a cynical interpretation that I was trying to have a self-serving opinion, and hopefully the speech spoke more loudly than that. But as a British producer, you'd be very hard pressed not to appreciate the contribution that the BBC makes to the creative ecology here. It has a very big and important role.
Do you think James gets that?
I don't know. You have to ask him. I don't know.
One more small point. In the speech, you also talk about Dennis Potter, about as a kind of very, very warmly. Now, he didn't just.
I wasn't that. I just said I'm with him when he said the point of television to make hearts pound. Now, if you actually watch Dennis Potter, I wasn't at the lecture. I watched it online as I was preparing for this. And I was thinking of Mark Thompson said, the bile with which he spoke, and particularly about my dad, funnily enough. I think he called his cancer Rupert, which I thought was disgusting. And he was quite frightening when you saw him speak. But, I thought it was important to be generous and say, if you really read the speech, there were some he was a program maker. I mean, he was a passionate believer in the power of fantastic stories. And I wanted to be able to be generous enough to give that credit.
And you can sort of forgive him the fact that he went as far as to say, I've called my cancer after Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, I think if anything, that's just quite sad, but of course.
Creative people are all difficult, aren't they?
Great people.
Yeah. How much influence has your father had in your career? How sort of close are you? You told us last night that he'd underwritten a bank loan when you went to buy the California TV stations.
Yeah.
And some suggestion that he sort of always liked. He may not have been convinced, but he'll back sort of ambition sort of thing. But how closely involved has he been with your career? How close are you to him now? How often do you see him?
He's my dad. I love him. We're close. We have normal father-daughter relationship. And as I said yesterday, I have been incredibly fortunate to be able to have quite a varied professional progression into all those different aspects of our industry as it's grown, from the beginning of broadcast network television into cable, into et cetera. It's whether or not it was by as much design as it actually turned out. Now I think about it and go, well, that was fantastic, that progression in terms of what I was able to experience. It wasn't so thought out at the time.
Did he have a hand in you going to Sky when you left the California stations?
He did, actually. I had actually applied for and got into Stanford. I wanted to go and do my MBA. And I called him and said, oh, Dad, I got into Stanford. I'm so excited. And he said, I shouldn't quote this, but I will. He was like, you don't need a fucking MBA. Go to Sky and learn about digital television.
Or go drinking with Sam Chisholm.
You can't drink with Sam Chisholm. I tried that. It's a big mistake. He'll drink you under the table.
Was he right, do you think?
Yeah. And look, I have huge in some ways, I would have loved to have gone and done that. And I think, particularly Stanford is a hotbed of entrepreneurial. It's right next to Silicon Valley. It's a fantastic place. But in terms of, I think, the reasons that at the time I wanted to go, I've actually realized that I didn't probably need it. But yeah.
So the advice was good in the end, as it turns out.
Yeah, I think so.
How has the last year been? I mean, obviously it's been difficult. You've mentioned that. What was it like to see your dad having to say, or saying in front of the select committee, this is the humblest day of my life?
I was pleased he said that, and I know he absolutely meant it, and it was, if I'm honest, as a daughter, it was sort of heartbreaking. But ultimately, I think the reason why the last year has been so difficult, and obviously not as difficult for us as for the people who've been victims or Millie Dowler's parents, but you know, I actually, and I'm sure this is true for people at HarperCollins or Dow Jones or any part of, you know, the bigger business, is that I feel incredibly responsible for the well-being of my own team, and to know that every single day for a period of time it was pages and pages and pages of coverage, and for them to have to walk into a meeting and people to go, how's this? That made me feel, that was the hardest thing, actually.
What do you, I mean, you talked last night about corporate ethics and a dearth of integrity and various other things. What's your diagnosis of what went wrong at News International? You
know what, Steve? There are hundreds of people and many millions of dollars being spent on that question. And, you know, I think I tried to give as much of a view, which may have sounded simplistic in terms of what I thought was important, in terms of that really clear articulation and of purpose and what values and behaviors come out of that purpose.
But they lost their way somewhere.
Obviously, I mean, I think Fleet Street in general lost their way a little bit, but you know, I don't think it's for me to elaborate on that.
I mean, people have interpreted your comment about profit without purpose as a partial diagnosis.
Well, I think it's a truism, and I think if you think about any of the greatest organizations, they understand the motive, the point of purpose, and that is what gives long-term, sustainable. The greatest businesses in the world have a very clear sense of purpose. And, you know, and it certainly wasn't a comment just on media. If you think about what's been happening over the last couple of years, I think it is time for us to not be afraid to talk about it.
What do you think about how James and your father ultimately handled the crisis as it unfolded?
You know, I don't think anybody would say that it was a textbook perfect in terms of, and I don't mean that, but just in general.
Sure. I mean, but it looked like a cover-up.
It's sorry?
It looked like a cover-up. For years and years, it looked as if, with Rebecca and James and others, all say nothing doing. And now we kind of know there was lots doing. It looked for all the world like a cover-up. So in a sense, that's almost worse than as usual, isn't it? It's the cover-up's worse than the crime.
Look, I'm not really going to go into that. You know, I wouldn't wish that situation upon anybody. I think it's a very difficult situation to be in that kind of maelstrom. But that's really.
I just have to ask you one question, because this has been, again, widely reported, the Independent, Telegraph and whatever. Did you at any point say to James, you fucked the company?
No, for the record, absolutely not.
Rebecca?
No, absolutely not. No. The quote actually, well, the made up quote actually, and it was ran in the Telegraph, I think, and I actually immediately asked them to retract it, and I denied saying it. We were at a dinner for Philip Gould, who'd written his book about his cancer. It was sponsored by the Times. It was quite a small dinner. It was the day, I think, the story was breaking about the Dowlers, and it was completely fabricated. I mean, so it's a...
So it's simply not true?
Completely not true. You know, I don't think I've spoken at all publicly, not once, until yesterday, about my family. I haven't mentioned them, so...
Did you vent, in the course of the discussions about how it should be dealt with, did you, I mean, again, you're reported to have been quite forceful in offering your opinion that Rebecca should resign, that James should take a step back. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, it is. But not, it was said within closed walls, and Rebecca did resign, had to resign.
What's your sense of where the company, the family firm, if you like, stands now?
I thought you were going to ask me about television.
I'm going to ask you that. It's coming.
It's coming, okay, good. Sorry, what was the question?
What's your sense of where the family firm sits now? Is it on the road to recovery? Is it still held back by phone hacking? Is it?
Look, I think the damage from the last year is, I mean, we all know it's been a very big deal, and it has been damaging, and that will take time to recover. And I think they're very well underway of trying to do that.
You talked about around the family table, the family and whatever growing up with the idea that you'd be perpetual outsiders. Mm. But last night you pitched very much as a kind of insider. I mean, you were both an outsider at the beginning of the speech, then the word "our" kept being used sort of throughout. Yeah. How do you see yourself in terms of British television? Do you think of yourself as an outsider or an insider?
Well, I'm incredibly proud to be part of this industry, so I guess in that way I feel like an insider. But you know, I really did enjoy talking about all my cultural arcane television references, because I've been coming here, when you come to this festival, I remember first coming here and literally having no idea what people were talking about. I remember meeting Dirty Dan and Ange, and I was like, who are you? And people had to sort of write me notes going, that's what they are. So, you know, I suppose given my, you know, I haven't been in this country for 30 years of my career, so I think I have, you know, possibly a little bit more of an outsider's perspective, but I feel, you know, but I relish being here and having, you know, a great company that's been born out of this market.
How different from your view, from your perspective, is the TV business, is the creative business in the UK to when compared to other places? You talked about the industrial structure, you talked about Shine being different to kind of studio model, and I can sort of see that. But creatively, Britain thinks it's special, but is it?
Look, I think there's great creativity all over the world.
We know that.
You know, we look at, you know, I'm sure everybody, I hope everybody here was as glued to Homeland as I was. That was an Israeli format. You look at our fantastic shows like Minute to Win It that came out of our Swedish company. You know, there is, you know, the level of television and creativity is. Look at The Bridge or The Killing, or you know, the bar is really very high. As I said, it's a global market. It's quite a competitive global market. Look at how Clash of the Choirs did in China, and I'm looking forward to when we're seeing product coming out of China and coming into our market, our markets. So you know, I think, you know, that we've had this is an incredibly fertile market. You know, we only need to look at the opening ceremony of the Olympics and just go, you know, our creative influence, you know, in the world for a very small island has been remarkable. You know, it's a country that has a rich intellectual property history. So in that way, I think it is a bit special.
In the way that British television works, and you now know it pretty well, certainly from a sort of a business and creative point of view, do you see any risks to British TV? Are there things that Britain or British television or broadcast needs to avoid? Are there trends? Are there things happening which you would worry about?
What I was trying to talk about yesterday, and you can't pack everything into the speech, but you know, the importance of that second screen strategy is, you can't underestimate it. You know, I think it's absolutely the opportunity for broadcasters and producers to learn how to, and we have to do it, you know, how we actually have a deeper relationship with our audience. And I think that's something that as program makers we feel more naturally comfortable with, I think, because...
I mean, you talked about sort of caring and, well, I'm going to sort of paraphrase this, sort of caring and sharing. You talk about an industry that needs to collaborate, an industry based upon sort of mutuality.
Yeah.
Is that the way Shine behaves towards its competitors? Or is it the way that Sky behaves?
Well, I can't speak for Sky because that doesn't have anything to do with me. But in terms of how Shine behaves, I hope it's... yes, I believe absolutely it's something that we pride ourselves on, that we want to be able to be partners and to experiment together and to build great valuable relationships with the audience, with our partners, and our partners for the most part are broadcasters. So, you know, I should let our partners tell us if that's true, but it's certainly something I
And do you think that all parties should sort of share, you were talking about data and learning lessons from retail and so on. Now, it's a rather small thing, this, maybe. David Abram has made quite a big deal out of trying to sort of deepen Channel 4's engagement with its viewers in these sorts of ways. I won't pretend to understand most of it myself, but I hear him say it.
Yeah.
And he also had a go at Sky, saying, well, what we really need is Sky, to make available all the data that they have, because they've got interactivity built in. They know quite a lot more about what their 10 million homes do than a regular free-to-air broadcaster.
Yeah.
Should Sky release that data?
I don't necessarily think that they have to. I mean, this is not a debate that I've really participated in, or I have a particularly well thought out view.
But in the spirit of caring and sharing.
But I think, you know, I think it's one of the reasons why, what I was trying to say about Sky in the beginning, it sort of was purpose built in some ways to be able to have a direct transactional relationship. You know, they are customers. You can pick up the phone and talk to them. And funny enough, I saw an interview with Stuart Murphy, I don't know if he's here, the other day, where he had all his commissioning editors call some of their viewers. You know, that's fantastic to be able to do that. And, you know, and I think that's where the other broadcasters now, funny enough, now have that opportunity. They didn't have it before. Sky did. But now with, you know, however, what percentage penetration, you know, our tablets are, but, you know, we really can engage with our audience, and I think they're all going to have to do that.
Just one more question. You talked about rights and how important rights are to your business in the independent sector, and how the terms of trade in the UK have been so significant, and plainly they have. There are noises coming from broadcasters, and it won't become as a surprise to you, along the lines that when dealing with Shine and companies like it, for all the good that they deliver, you know, you're talking to a division of a major global, multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation, essentially. And why should you, the global multi-billion-dollar corporation, right, have the lion's share of the secondary benefits when the people who paid for it all in the first place, the broadcaster, is increasingly impoverished? So
they don't pay for it all. Okay. May I say?
But the point might be the balance has gone wrong. Is going wrong here. That too much is going to people such as yourself.
Well, look, there's many points to that. If you remember when Channel 4 actually did have rights, the returns were minuscule. It just wasn't a priority for them, and I think everyone was, and we shouldn't have been as surprised, but you know, when you actually looked at when the rights were put back in the hands of the IP creators, the huge improvement in terms of the return on that IP. So, you know, and if you think about when the terms of trade, I mean, I remember Peter Bazalgette was saying, you know, if you actually think about what returns the broadcasters get on the first broadcast window, and the catch up, and the this and that, you know, they were getting 90% of, you know, the lion's share of the return on that product. So, you know, I think I don't think it's gone out of kilter. And also, I sort of have this, you know, if I think about Shine, even in the UK, there's a Shine group in the UK, you know, we are multiple smaller labels, and very successful labels, and some that are just starting. If I look at the the money we're putting in to start up the Hatch, if I think about Lovely Day, which we've just started with Diedrich Santer, if I think about Brown Eyed Boy with Gary Reich and comedy, you know, we actually, I don't see why broadcasters should feel that our ability to stimulate and bring in new diverse talent and, you know, create new entrepreneurs, if anything, it's a huge contribution to this, to the market, I think.
But okay, so you don't think the balance is wrong?
No.
And you don't think that there might be an argument for saying, well, once you become a kind of global super indie part of, you know, mega corporation, that the deal might be different?
No, okay. I don't. And I don't think the argument holds any water whatsoever. It's not a particularly intellectual argument. But what I do think, and what I tried to say, is the terms of trade for me are a minimum backstop. You then have the ability to have a conversation. You know, if you think about what are we going to talk about? If you have a hit show, can we talk about a longer term deal?
Yeah.
What could we do in partnership off air with that show? You know, and I think about those kind of relationships, which, you know, you look at Australia, which we have with Channel 10 on MasterChef, which is a massive success show. You know, it is, timing is everything. And I look at the US now with MasterChef being a very big success on Fox, and, you know, we're now having very constructive, collaborative conversations about what more can we do with this fantastic franchise. And that's something that, when I talk about mutuality, yeah, that's just a grown-up conversation.
When you used the term in your speech yesterday several times, believe in better, did you know that that's the Sky slogan? You do know.
I did know that.
Just checking.
I did know that. I actually have always been very jealous of that slogan because I think it's so brilliant. And actually they introduced it when James was there, and it's absolutely what the ethos of Sky was and is. And yes, I did know that. I actually thought about, do I want to say it that way? And I was like, yeah, I do.
Okay.
So.
Now, I know you say you don't want the top job, but I'm about to open it up for questions.
Oh, come on, he looks great.
Here we go. So, just supposing that you were in the top job, and Dominic Mohan had phoned you up and said, look, boss, what are we going to do? Would you have published this picture?
Well, thankfully, I don't have to make that decision.
But imagine.
You know what? I think, and we were talking about this before, I think it would be very sad if we lived in a world where you can't publish that picture. You know, even in my MacTaggart tunnel of the last couple of days, I went online and checked out the pictures. So I don't understand why if
by the way, that's the most animated you've been all morning.
Look, he's really cute. And I thought quite sweet, being quite careful. I feel bad for him. I just think, oh, God, take the bloody mobile phones away. And he's a young guy having fun. Anyway, but, you know, in terms of, we've all seen the pictures online. You know, if newspapers can't participate in that, I think it asks questions about where print and online.
So this doesn't smack to you as evidence of what you describe as a kind of dearth of ethics or dearth of integrity?
No, I don't think it's an example of that.
I mean,
I think there is a public interest argument to that.
Okay, I mean, the counter argument might be, of course, that the whole phone hacking thing started because him and his brother were hacked by people from the same company.
Well, that's a very different issue than that's very different from some girl with a camera phone sending a picture to TMZ. I would imagine
it's more the question of the decision to publish it, I suppose.
Sorry?
It's more a question about the decision to publish it.
Look, I don't know what decision I would have made, but I understand their decision, and I actually think that
you think you probably would have done?
Probably.
Okay. Over to you. Questions, contributions? I've turned the lights off, otherwise nobody can see anything. Sorry, I still can't see.
Do you pick?
There's a chap right in the middle here, to start with. And do tell us who you are. Do indicate, and I'll get around as many of you as I can.
Yes, it's Toby Seifert from Enders Analysis. you started saying some very interesting things, I thought, yesterday, about companies like yours, production companies, getting more involved with things like YouTube as they're changing, and getting involved in doing things which are, sort of, as it were, directly online. And I wondered whether you could say a little bit about your vision of how those developments are going to run over the next few years.
If I knew exactly how they would run, it would be, it'd be genius. Look, it's something that we can't ignore. It's the pure numbers. If you look, there was a report that came out the other day that I think 80% of 16 to 25-year-olds get their music through YouTube now. And if you only need to meet, there's a wonderful, there's a friend of mine, Jamal Edwards here in the UK, who is something called SBTV. I think he's just passed 125 million views. He's amazing, by the way. Jamal, if you're here, you rock. And you think, that is a very passionate audience, that is forming very, sincere relationships with YouTube stars and YouTube content. And I think, particularly from we make content, we tell stories. And to be able to go direct to audience is an incredibly exciting and liberating thing. I think the interesting thing over the next year or so is how, and it's changing very quickly actually already, how that actually gets monetized. Can you make a living doing that? Is there going to be another industry? And I would think, and it won't only be YouTube. I specifically talk about YouTube because 80% of online video is watched on YouTube, but I don't think that's necessarily always going to be the case. It's a very open, I'll point to the internet, it's very open in terms of competition. But if you think about the functionality, that's why I told the story of Michelle Phan. She didn't go out, she's been on YouTube for 5 years. Really, she started a long time ago. And it's only now that she has begun to think about going direct to consumer with her samples product. And I think as you start to see, and we all know that sort of home delivery of product has become, that sort of subscription commerce is beginning to explode. Particularly in the US. And I think as you begin to see that, if you think about what people like YouTube might be able to introduce with subscription, at the moment subscription is very simple. I like it, they feed my videos to me, I create playlists, etc. But when they introduce the ability to have a subscription, which is a payment system, I think you begin to. I think that's what we need to be looking at.
Do you think? I can see that in the case of the makeup, like the woman you're talking about, and there are examples of people using this technology amazingly effectively to generate commercial businesses in a flash, really, because it gives one person access to so many millions of people, in an instant. Is it really, for the majority of what you do and what people in this room do, is it really ever going to be any more? It might, for some individuals, in some cases, it might sort of go very big, but it's not going to replace the mainstream TV business, is it?
I think you can say, when you look, I'm future gazing. You think about connected televisions. And you turn it on, and there's a button for Netflix, a button for YouTube, a button for the BBC, a button for Channel 4, and you think, well, is there going to be much more equality, in terms of the choices? That's why I kept going back to multi-channel television. Everyone said, I remember when I did the Worldview here a long time ago, 14 years ago, and even back to my 1989, to my dad's speech, and there was a sense of, Sky's never gonna really be on the same stage. And you look at what Stuart's done, and Jeremy and Sophie at Sky, and you look at the unbelievable amount of fantastic content. And
I suppose the argument might be that the one thing that has persisted, though, in terms of its attractiveness, is kind of linear TV. Admittedly,
No, but
coming from different sources, devoured in different, consumed in different ways, but linear
yeah.
TV's been pretty resilient.
Yeah, but I wouldn't argue that YouTube is still linear stories. You can talk to the person who's, it's a much more engaged and direct conversation, but they're not telling linear stories.
Down here, do tell us who you are.
Hello, David Brooke from 1+1 Media Group.
Hello, David.
Hello. Great speech last night, very inspirational and really excellent. Your life story feels like one long success story. My question is, what would make it a great story would be some insight into, have you had to deal with any failures, and do you have any character flaws?
I have so many character flaws.
For example, perhaps guilty pleasure at the experience of your brother James's screw-up?
No, that's not one of my character flaws at all. Maybe because I was making a speech, I had to make it sound like it was all successful. I always make the joke that, David, I think you even know this. I've had many screw-ups. I remember being in LA. I was sent to LA by Tony Ball to renew the Friends deal. And I went and I negotiated with, and it was a big, big thing to keep Friends, and it was up for renewal, and it was Warner Brothers, and it was Jeffrey Schlesinger, he's actually a very nice man and a friend of mine now, but at the time he was the most intimidating person I'd ever met. He used to wear these sort of sunglasses that got darker, as the negotiations went on. And it completely freaked me out. Anyway, and I was there by myself. And I went and we had this negotiation, and I made our offer, which was the offer I knew I could make, and et cetera. And I came down in the lift in Warner Brothers, and it was Michael Jackson, and I can't remember who else, but I should remember because I can see his face, going up. I was like, fuck, oh God. And it was the middle of the night in England, and I thought to myself, I think we're screwed. Like, I'm gonna have to make a bigger offer because they're serious. Like, Michael's here. Like, they're gonna make, and I didn't. I didn't want to wake Tony. I was scared, I guess. I didn't think, and it was such a huge lesson. We lost it, and I was devastated, and.
What did Tony
Apologetic.
say?
I offered to resign. I mean, he was pretty understanding, but in a way, you kind of think with your boss,
in a Thames television engineer sort of way. Fuck me now.
Yeah. You fucking did what? And actually, it's one of those things where now it's just with more confidence. I hope everyone on my team would never have to wait for me. If you need to make a call and something is strategically important, make the call and ask later. I should have just gone straight back upstairs and waited outside and said, whatever they pay, I'll pay more. But I didn't.
Even your mistakes had a positive legacy, because on the back of that deal, Channel 4 were able to launch E4 on the back of Friends.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
Thanks very much for that.
You're welcome.
Who else would like to contribute? Down here and there, and then two there. Just go down here first if we can. Chap on the left there. And if you can get a microphone to someone up there, at the back there.
It's Jason Stone from The Drum. I noted in your speech... I'm here.
Sorry.
I noted in your speech yesterday you stressed the word current in expressing your support for the BBC's universal licence fee. Were you repenting past sins, or are you suggesting you might change your mind in the future?
I was suggesting I might change my mind in the future. Not with any ominous threat in any way whatsoever, but the whole point about accountability to license fee payers is I think they're doing a very good job. Things change. I think it's always, I'm not somebody who is a diehard, I will never change, my view on this. It really depends on how it's working and how it's operating and
What if you don't mind me asking, is it conditional upon?
you know, it would be probably the same conditions as it would be for any single one of the universal license fee payers. You know, I think, you know, we are in a democracy. If there is an uprising to say the BBC is not delivering on their purpose and this is outrageous, you know, I think I wouldn't be the only person to have a say about it.
Might there be a case in your mind for subscription in rather than compulsory license fee?
I'm not even going to enter that debate. I mean, I think the universal license fee works at the moment.
So not broke, don't fix it. At the back there. And then cross here, if that's all right. Someone can't remember.
Hi. Sorry, voice gone. Catherine Rushton from the Daily Telegraph. You've previously said that you think that that BBC's in-house production should be either axed or significantly trimmed. Do you still believe that?
Have I said that?
Yeah, you did.
I don't think I'd ever said that.
Yep. I said that in 2009.
Funny enough, Steve actually wrote a really good piece, I thought, the other day,
so much.
in The Independent, I think, which talked about sort of producer choice, really. And I think you talked about the Burt revolution and sort of where does that go and is it complete? And you know, I think far be it for me to call for something like that, but I think personally that really great producers like to make for many, many customers. I think a competitive production sector is very healthy. I think it makes product better. I think which serves the audience. You know, it's fun being an independent producer. I think the BBC, I think they should all come and be independent producers. But I think that's something that I think is going to be a valid conversation that, you know, I think George is going to have to think about. And it may not, I don't think it necessarily is draconian. I think it's just a thought of how you actually have a competitive and vibrant program supply for all the PSBs. So.
Is that the course of action that you think he should take in order to trim budgets then?
I think he should. I think he will. I mean, I think we'll look at it. And I think it. I don't know yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Daniel, do tell us who you are.
I'm just a film director. Gary Fraser. Sorry. I enjoyed your speech yesterday.
Thank you.
But in 2 years' time, we're going to be having a referendum up here, and I heard you talking about UK TV industry.
This is one of those things I have to be slow down.
Sorry.
I'm kidding.
Have you ever worked at the call centre in Livingston?
Are you asking me about a Scottish referendum?
Yeah, what I'm
no
basically saying is, if Scotland does get independence, can you see that he's got to be investing in Scotland for a Scottish output? Because at the moment, it seems like London or down south seems to have all the output for what goes on. Can you see it being more regional, if there's power to the people in terms of online and audiences like that? Do you understand what I mean?
Are you talking now about the BBC or just Scotland in general?
I'm talking about broadcasters in general, not just the BBC.
I don't know if I have an answer for that. Other than, you know, I think there is great creativity everywhere. So, you know, I'm sorry, I don't really have an answer for that. I'm not quite sure. Sorry.
That chap there with his hand up there, and then down here. And forgive me, if you do indicate, and we can take another 2 or 3. Chap at the back there, in a moment. Hold on. Down here first, where are we?
Hi, I'm Matt Pace, BBC Worldwide. You talked about terms of trade and producers being better than distributors, than broadcasters at exploiting rights. Sky are now talking about setting up their own distribution arm, and
they have. I think they've just bought something.
Their terms of trade are less favourable to producers than the PSBs. Can you tell us what lobbying you've done to Sky to discourage them from setting up a distributor?
None.
How come? Given that Sky, your parent company, has most of the voting stock in Sky, surely you've got an influence there.
No. You know what? I absolutely haven't. If anything, we did say, actually, could we distribute your product? So as a distributor, we were quite keen to be able to distribute their product.
Maybe turn the argument around then. Should Sky, do you think, change its terms of trade to fall into line with the PSBs?
Yes, I would love that to happen. I really would love that to happen. You know, if I think about the terms of trade and the contribution that it makes to this creative sector, I think it would be something that I would wholeheartedly welcome. And as I said, I think the terms of trade are a base point, and I think you can then have a conversation after that.
Chat about that, number 2. Do tell us who you are.
Brian Woods from Trivision, independent producer. You talked about the importance of competition and being able to supply to, as an indie, supplying to different broadcasters. I very much agree with that. But what about the BBC in-house producers being able to produce for ITV, Channel 4, Sky? What do you think about that?
I think that would be great for them if they wanted to do that. I'm not sure what the issues would be.
I think there might be.
I think there's probably quite a few issues.
Well, there might be a bit of a rumpus if they've got 50% of the BBC guaranteed to them, and then they're allowed to go and compete. I think it would be sort of, hang on a second, but you know.
Yeah, well, okay. Taking that aside, the point being, do I think making for multiple clients is a good thing and makes you better? Yes, okay. I do. Whether or not I'm taking your point, but I think you can't just take and isolate a little bit. I think a lot of things would then have to change.
Okay, we're sort of coming to the end now, but I'll take a couple more. There's someone down here. Do say who you are.
Oh, hello. Julian Wilkins, Blue Pencil magazine. Elisabeth, thank you for being with us. Last night in your address, you made reference to building new cathedrals. What would you do to build those cathedrals, and what impediments do you see in the building process?
Well, hopefully the whole speech was about some of the things I thought would build our new cathedrals, and I think the thing that I really was trying to get across, possibly not very well, was, you know, the idea of looking across generations, looking across technologies, the idea that, you know, our new cathedral, so to speak, has the Steve Jobs and Lord Reith as the forefathers. And, you know, I think that's something that what I was hopefully trying to encourage people to get their heads around, and I certainly don't have answers that nobody else would have in this room, you know, but I do think there is an urgency to it, and I think we need to be more experimental. I think we need to work together to figure out how we build that.
Okay, and last one there.
Hi, it's Steve Clark from Variety. I wanted to ask you, you said you're not interested in running News Corps, but would you be interested in being the first female Director General of the BBC?
Yes.
That would be...
The other family
Can you
firm,
imagine?
yes. Well,
I'm just laughing, I'm sorry. Can you imagine? I think the BBC would roll in their grave.
There are in fact a few BBC people here who are not actually falling off their chairs.
I don't know.
But just okay, listen. Just before we go, when Shine was bought by News Corporation, you were going to take up. You were at one stage going to take a position on the board. You decided not to do that. You said that your speech is not a sort of pitch for the big job. Can you foresee a time when you might play a bigger role in the family firm in any form?
Not at the moment. You know,
Would you like to?
Look, as a shareholder, and a significant shareholder with my brothers and sisters, you know, I think and hope the family will be positive contributors, even just as shareholders, in terms of the long-term interests of the company and for the other shareholders. But that's really as far as I see it. So.
Okay. Well, listen, you've been remarkably candid. Thank you very much for your time. It was a great speech last night.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this.
Yes.
That's the right word. Your appreciation, please, for Elisabeth Murdoch.